We've got Ravi Peravali from Tavant. Tavant, thanks for joining us from the Bay Area, right?
Thank you. Yeah, from the Bay Area, Eric.
Good to have you here, and thank you for switching it up on the last minute. Now, we're going to be talking about how AI is affecting all stages of the OTT workflow, but Tavant may be a company that's a little bit new to at least some of our viewers. So could you first start by talking about who and what Tavant is, what it is you do, and how you're working with media companies?
Sure. First, thanks for having me on, Eric. And so Tavant is a engineering, software development, and services company. We're headquartered in the Bay Area and have about 3,000 employees. So we work across a couple of verticals where we are developing digital solutions, backend solutions. But one of our larger focus areas is media. We work with a number of leading media companies. As a matter of fact, we are working with 3 of the 5 largest media companies in the US. So we do a couple of things, and while the focus is really AI, is one is obviously streaming is very dependent on having an OTT platform. And Bill, if you look at especially the larger companies, nobody's taking an off-the-shelf OTT platform and using it. It is actually built piecemeal. So if you think about it, an OTT platform, right from the content ingestion to processing to the QA of that, metadata extraction, then taking that metadata, pushing it out to the CMS system. Then you have DRM systems, et cetera, et cetera. So really what we do is we work with our customers either to custom develop some of these, like we've done a lot of custom work in the area of subscription management, content management, and some level DRM. And then the other thing we do is we tie everything together. And by tying everything together, we automate the workflow of this. And second thing is, if you look at each one of the components I spoke about, they generate a lot of data, which is siloed.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, one of the big things that we are seeing is, a lot of the OTT companies, if you think about it, have traditionally been broadcasters. You look at NBC with Peacock, Disney with their Disney Plus, and they've really, relied on, the cable companies, the satellite companies to distribute content. They've really never had a need for a direct-to-consumer relationship. So a lot of investment in taking data from these various components and tying it together, building data warehouses, et cetera. So that's the second thing we do. And finally, advertising obviously drives a lot of the content consumption. And we are very involved in, and I think we'll talk a little bit in more detail about specifically some of the challenges these companies are facing in advertising. And that's the third area we're focused on.
Okay, very good. Our previous panel was all about AI and machine learning. And one thing became very clear was that it's virtually impossible to manage all of this data, all of these services without using at least some level of AI and machine learning, right?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there is the entire, I think if you look at, and again, AI, ML, and cloud are, overloaded terms and used separately. But you're absolutely right. When I think about AI, ML, there is obviously the entire, data pipeline and data engineering. And I, sort of mentioned the challenge of that is getting data from all these disparate sources, doing QE on it, aggregating it, et cetera, and the data governance that goes into it. But the second part is visualization. And finally, it's the advanced analytics. And there is, you're absolutely right, a lot of emphasis in that area. And, while there's, AI ML is not new to media, media probably has been one of the sort of, from our perspective, leaders in this domain, and they've been doing it for a long time. But a couple of areas I are really focused right now, especially when it comes to streaming. One is, believe it or not, Eric, and I see this with myself. Do you know that 20% of user time is spent actually on content discovery as
At
opposed,
least, yeah.
yeah.
Right. At
So think
least
about it.
that seems low.
First you're trying to figure out, hey, which one of these 10 services should I use?
Right.
Then you're flipping from them. So content discovery is one of the big areas that we are seeing a lot of investment in, because it really is. I think especially with all these services, and you're hearing of from Netflix all of this about sort of churn. So by uh, so content discovery, really there's multiple aspects to it.
Hmm.
But the first one is really taking the video and extracting metadata. So by metadata, it is who are the actors in this, what is the location, what is the context, all of this. So that has become a very important thing. And right now, a lot of the major cloud players like Google has their own video API. Then Azure has what they call the video processing. So these services to extract this metadata have sort of become commoditized. But like all of these image and video processing, the quality of data, there's a lot of work that goes into curating it. And the second part is obviously the audio extraction, the subtitling, all of this. So that is a good part of what we are seeing in the industry, is the need to build these pipelines for metadata extraction. And then once you extract the metadata, obviously there is the QA that needs to go into it. Then you need to index it, and then you need to really put a smart search and cataloging sort of layer on top of that. So that's one area where we are seeing quite a bit of, I think, sort of investment from media companies. Second, obviously, is the more commoditized areas. I mean, I think the large companies have been investing in recommender systems, churn analysis, etc. So while these, the models to build this has become commoditized, uh, but again, there is a lot of work that goes into feature engineering, figuring out, what data needs to go into this, what features are needed. And then there is the constant updating of these models, maintaining it. So that's the second part of what we are doing, specifically in the area of AI/ML.
Okay, very good. Now, you mentioned analytics a little bit, and obviously, analytics has never been more important for streaming services, to be able to gain insights into their audiences and what they want, to
Yeah.
prevent churn, to attract new customers. What are the key types of analytics that streaming services need insights into?
So, you know, uh, so one is, I would be surprised if there's not multiple sessions on this. So this whole area of identity has become big, isn't it?
Hmm.
Especially, with third-party cookies going away, everything we're seeing with ad ID, and you're hearing Facebook and all these companies, the challenges they're having around, ad measurement and attribution. So what we're seeing is across the media domain, not just with companies offering OTT services, but we do work with a number of large publishers and other media companies, is the need to build an identity platform of their own. Okay,
Hmm.
which is if you look at it again, going back to silos of data, there's customer data in CRMs, then you have customer behavior data, which comes in the form of clickstream data from various devices, and the plethora of devices out there. And then you have subscription management systems and all these components that go into an OTT system that have data. So and then obviously there is third party data coming in, like for example, if you're a broadcaster and you're using a cable service, you need to get viewership data from like viewership aggregators like 605 and other companies. So that is one area that we are seeing, large media companies, and right from NBC to CBS to all the large broadcasters investing, plus the publishers is their own data platforms. And the second area that I so is really the push on media companies to show ROI on advertising. So
Mm-hmm.
this is really looking at attribution. And attribution is something that we've been doing for 2, 3 years. We have built various attribution models. But one thing that we've done that's fairly interesting is attributing uh, viewership to a television ad. And we use you know we use what we do is we get data from loyalty card informations, and then we do a what's called a third party blind match, and then sort of link that with what customers have viewed to show lift. So these are some of the things, Eric, that we're doing in the area of AI specific to advertising.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of advertising, probably the biggest, or certainly one of the biggest trends we've seen in the last 2 years is the growth of advertising-based streaming services. I think when the pandemic hit in early 2020, everyone just subscribed to everything they could, right?
Yeah.
And I'm exaggerating, but not much. The number of SVOD service subscriptions shot way up. Sooner or later, that was bound to catch up with people, and
Yeah.
we all checked our credit card statements and saw how much we were paying for, and said, maybe I should check out these advertising-based services. And wouldn't you know it, they had gotten a lot better than probably since the last time most of us had looked at them. Um,
Yeah.
so, what are content providers doing to ensure an effective advertising strategy, or what can they do, and how can a company like Tavant help them?
Yeah. So again, the key is what I mentioned before. Key is really, if you look at brands and advertisers, it's really you're competing in a not just in the streaming world. There's there is obviously you're competing with everybody, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think what streaming companies have to do, and what we're working with companies, is, as I said, really figuring out and developing these platforms to understand who's your audience, and then enabling them to sort of segment their audience and etc. Because and obviously this is much more challenging than it sounds, because you have GDPR, you have the California, all these regulations coming
Mm-hmm.
in. So you have to be really cognizant of that and ensure your data governance is taking care of that. So that's one thing we are doing, is really helping build out these DMPs. And the other thing that's happening specifically in broadcasting, and not necessarily related to analytics, is, so think about a company like a Dish or an NBC. Now they have a multitude of ad inventory. You have linear inventory for live TV. You have digital, and in some cases addressable linear inventory. And if you look at the ad systems that go into these, they're disparate. I mean, you have for digital you have GAM, you have Freewheel. For linear, you have Mediaocean, Wide Orbit. So the other thing that's happening is the need to unify all of this inventory. So, because if I'm an advertiser, I want to come to, let's say, a Dish or an NBC and say, this is what I want. And you have to be able to sell this, traffic it, measure it across all of this. And that's another area we've been very focused on. As a matter of fact, we have developed some frameworks and IP in that area to help uh, some of these companies bring all of this, uh, inventory together, and traffic it, and uh, etc. in a unified way.
All right, very good. One of the things we haven't talked about is something else that is driving consumer choice, and that's quality of experience. Consumers want their services, whether they are subscription driven or advertising driven, to provide them with a quality of experience that rivals what they're used to on broadcast.
Yeah.
But that's a very labor intensive process, or at least it has been. I know Tavant's been working with some customers to help automate that. And can you talk about any of the customers that are using Tavant to help automate their QoE, and how they're doing it?
Sure, great question. So you're absolutely right, Eric. So think about any of these apps, right from web-based to mobile to whatever, Apple TV, Roku, and the list keeps expanding
Yes.
almost every day with these smart TVs. So, being able to test your service across of this is very labor intensive. As a matter of fact, even some of the most technically advanced companies, they have, armies of people who are, using a playbook and clicking on all of this to see how the service works. And the other thing is, if you look at quality of experience, there are certain things that you are more challenging to do. Like, for example, with 5G, a lot more consumption of content across the mobile networks as opposed to internet. So there you have, all sorts of issues with network speed, et cetera, bandwidth fall. Uh, so what we've done is we have created a framework that really automates all of this. So what it does is it takes the need to sort of test on all of these devices. So we have, developed, again, without getting into too many details, a proxy server which actually processes the incoming feeds and is able to look at things like, the various controls for the media players. We're able to do things like throttling network speed to look at how adaptive bitrate is working. We are able to do performance testing on this and, take up the loads. Like, for example, when there's a certain event like the Super Bowl, to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that this happens. So this is a framework, again, we've developed, and it's being, jointly with some of our, one of the larger customers that we are working with in this area is, we've done some work with CNBC to automate this.
Okay. Very good. We're running out of time here, but I know you talked about some of the ways that you work with various companies in the OTT space. Anything else that you didn't get a chance to mention in that opening question that our viewers should know about regarding Tavant working with media companies?
No, I think the key thing is, I'll just summarize sort
Mm-hmm.
of where I think, where I see, because we get a sort of a view of all the media companies and
Right.
what they're doing is, as I said, I think, this OTT platform continues to be a big, enhancing that to get better quality of experience, continues to be a big investment. Second is obviously analytics
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And at this, again, this is not a problem that can be solved, overnight, because there is so much data in the organization. It is very siloed. It's expensive putting this together, maintaining these pipelines. So that's an area that continues to garner a lot of investments and finally, what I talked about, advertising and, building data management platforms and everything related to ad measurement and attribution. So at least I believe these are going to be areas of continued focus for the large media companies. And
All
that's where
right.
we're really, continuing to invest in terms of frameworks and engineering capability.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much. And again, thanks for switching order with Peter here. And hopefully Peter
And
has his webcam figured out. Again, that was Ravi Peravali from Tavant, and you can learn more at tavant.com. So
okay,
thanks so much, Ravi.